Hi, I'm Nathan Ryan. You're on genconnectU.com, where we are conducting a live webinar event sponsored by RAM, an international media research company. In today's world of rapidly expanding content channels and devices, research is essential for every content publisher. RAM works closely with content publishers in designing a complete research program that best fits the goals and objectives of each client. Having conducted more than 60 million interviews of advertising and editorial content, RAM currently has the largest reference database in the world. Each year, RAM delivers over $1 million in ROI to its clients just in North America. Today, we are joined by Jack Myers, who is a media ecologist, chairman of Myers BizNet, and publisher of Media Village, the media and advertising industry's foremost thought leadership platform, and publishing home of more than 60 industry leaders and popular journalists. Jack's new book, The Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century, is now available at Amazon. Good afternoon, Jack.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Before we dive into the discussion, could you briefly touch on each of the 5 future-looking trends in media and marketing?
Sure. First of all, thanks again for inviting me to join you today, and thanks to all of you for being on the call, on the conference. I've written a lot about change. I've spoken a lot about change in our industry over the last 4 decades that I've been working in this business, and you know, we've all been a part of change pretty much for our whole career. In fact, if you think back to your career, I'm wondering if any of us can remember a time when change has not been an industry mantra. We talk about transformation, about transition, about reinvention. I think they're all overused words, and they're all somewhat redundant. But the difference today, unlike even just a few years ago, is that there are patterns that are emerging that inform us how to change. As opposed to talking about the need for change, it's how do we change? What do we change? What do we do that empower us to form a reasonably reliable vision for the future and to adapt our businesses, our revenue models according to that future vision? So what I prepared were our 5 future-looking trends in media and advertising that I think we can confidently incorporate into our strategic planning, our organizational restructuring, and our investment. And those 5 points are agency realignment and reinvention, and media company realignment and reinvention, both reinventing our business models as well as reinventing our relationship and customer relationship management models. Number 2, reinventing content and the way content is both developed and distributed. Number 3, I believe we're seeing a wave of new owners and new players coming into our business, the media and advertising business. And I also believe in what I call a startup boot hill, that we're seeing the beginning of a trend toward a lot of the VC companies that have been invested in over the last several years beginning to be merged, consolidated, or simply disappearing. Trend 4, of course, data. You can't have any trends without data. Big data, but in order to skate where the puck is going on data, I recommend that we begin talking more about emotional data, and I'll speak a bit about that. And trend number 5, smart staffing. I believe we have to look at our HR organizations and how we're staffing, and that there are some major trends along those lines.
Okay.
So,
how is media? Oh, sorry. I was going to ask you, how is media buying and selling changing, and will issues of transparency be solved?
Well, well, taking the second part last, will issues of transparency be resolved? Just in the last few days, we've seen a back and forth between the 4As and the ANA related to transparency issues. They are going to continue to be a challenge for the industry. We're waiting for the ANA report from 2 experts to come out. They've been conducting interviews. There's a lot of righteous indignation from industry leaders, even though, you know, everyone has known these same issues have been going on forever. I think some players will be caught up in the firestorm. I believe it will come back to media companies, because ultimately the money flow that is at the core of transparency issues is coming from media companies. So it's inevitable, it seems to me, that media companies will get caught up in that firestorm. Most of the agencies are already changing their behavior, their contracts, and it remains to be seen whether these issues will result in more transparency, but continued active engagement in the policies that have been non-transparent just becoming more transparent, or whether, because those are in place in a lot of the world, or whether agencies will and client relationships will focus more on performance, and economic business models will go away. Going back to the first part, will media buying and planning change? And certainly programmatic and procurement-based media buying and selling is and will continue to gain increased priority, especially in digital. We're looking toward rapid increase, and we have to expand out the word programmatic to automated, and recognize that every media company needs to invest in automated buying, selling businesses, and procedures, even at the highly local level, that there needs to be more opportunity for self-contained, computer-based transactions, buying, selling, self-serve platforms. I also think, you know, all of us have heard the John Wanamaker quote, "I know only half my advertising works. The problem is I don't know which half." I think we have to reimagine that statement. I think he's, you know, I've believed he may have been misquoted. And that what he really said was, only half or less of my advertising works, but I don't care which half, because it's cheap. And I think that relates to the way a lot of advertisers are looking at media today, and the way they're looking at some of the digital issues around bot fraud and ad blocking, lack of viewability in digital. I think the way they're positioning it, here's how many valid impressions I bought, even if it's a third of my total digital weight. As long as my cost for that third that's effective is cheaper year to year, then the procurement people are saying that's okay. And there's less real attention, I think, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, being paid to issues that are somewhat plaguing the digital universe, because at the end of the day, it serves the procurement officer's needs for cheap inventory. So what we really have is this fundamental conflict between what's cheap, what's most cost efficient, and what's most effective from a performance and sales point of view. And in that context, I believe in buying and planning, strategic and ideas and creativity will gain increased prominence. And I want to just add also that at the end of this call, you will, all of you on the call, I believe, will be receiving our white paper that includes these points I'm making. But strategic ideas and creativity will gain increased prominence. And that means that marketers and advertisers will be tapping into what we know as the below-the-line budgets. And in the newspaper industry especially, we know that the co-op budget, the vendor support programs, all tap into those vendor support budgets, those co-op budgets that come from sales promotion and below the line. And I believe those below the line budgets are going to be more activated in above the line media. And that's a great opportunity for newspaper companies, especially because they've been so engaged and involved in working with their retail advertisers on vendor support programs. I believe those are going to gain more prominence, and that ad agencies, media agencies, will try to take over some of those programs. I also believe it'll be, on the social media side, there'll be a lot more in the way of brand advocates, paid brand advocates, corporate funded brand advocacy, and they're all going to kind of mesh together under a brand advocacy model that taps directly into the, through social media, into the consumers and engages the consumer more through paid media. And that creative account and media planning will rebundle. Creative and media, I believe, will rebundle both at the creative agency and also at the media agency. And in that context, we're seeing media companies starting their own creative agencies. We've seen that at the Dallas Morning News. We see that at Turner Broadcasting, at Viacom, and other companies where they're literally building in-house creative agencies. Media sellers will become very wary of side deals with agencies and marketers, again, because of the transparency issue. I also believe that media companies and agencies are going to get more engaged in e-commerce and direct business services, which I can talk about a little later.
How are marketers rethinking their content strategies, and what does this mean for news media?
Well, content, we all in the media business, advertising business, have seen the growth of branded content, branded entertainment. We're seeing branded journalism, native journalism. These have become new buzzwords. But there are clear trends toward advertisers becoming more focused on content to communicate their message, their thought leadership, and their voice, and integrating their brand message within content that presents itself either as knowledge-based or journalistic, or a trend focus or insights, as opposed to the direct buy this unique selling proposition, traditional advertising messages. So I believe branded journalism and native content will gain value, but only when the media brand has equity value to the marketer to begin with. And that's a challenge where startup media companies get into the branded content space, but they have no brand equity themselves that marketers want to associate with. So whether it's the local newspaper or the TV program, where there's established brand equity that's valuable to the marketer, where there are journalists who are valuable in their brand to the marketer, then branded content is, again, it needs to be legitimate and truly valuable and relevant to the consumer, will grow. I believe we'll see multiple news media integrating their news collection in an AP type model, but news aggregation, news collection and publishing around collaborative content services. Marketers will increasingly focus their messages on storytelling. Storytelling is the hottest new buzzword in the industry. It has been for a while, but it's gaining prominence. Narratives that can be delivered through creative and relevant content, and advertising based on a story well told will reemerge as a marketing priority. I think we're going to see a growing focus on sponsorships, kind of like a Back to the Future of the 1950s, when every television program had a sponsor associated with it. Content ownership and advertisers association with media brands across multiple distribution platforms, so that the advertiser will stay with the content across all platforms where that content is distributed. I believe media and marketers will form business partnerships, especially at the national level, business partnerships where the advertiser has a piece in the back end, long tail success of a media property. Traditional bundled media distribution packages and think of cable television, for example, where you're seeing over the top and the disintegration of the bundle. I believe across all media, we're going to see a disintegration and then a reintegration that makes more sense around improved business models. Supply of high engagement inventory like sports will decrease. There will be less and less media properties where the consumer is truly engaged, which again I think feeds newspapers, which is a high engagement medium. And supply of low engagement inventory will exponentially increase and costs will come down. So the key for media owners is to focus on high engagement inventory and to place a premium on that inventory and extend it across multiple platforms. And I believe also that there'll be a trend toward marketers increasing their focus on and making better investments in local community media that have meaningful local vendor support opportunities, resources available to the marketers. So I can move on to number 3.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, how will legacy media companies partner with tech-focused Silicon Valley companies? And what's next for the thousands of VC-funded ad tech companies?
Well, that's of course, it's a loaded question because, you know, I believe many of the leading legacy media companies are in play. They're positioned for mergers, they're positioned for acquisitions, they're positioned for privatization. Tech-focused Silicon Valley media companies are beginning to look at the possibility of acquisition, whether it's Facebook or Google acquisition within the more legacy media place. We've seen Jeff Bezos independently buying the Washington Post. While that's his own personal agenda, I believe we're going to see more companies looking at extension opportunities into other media. I think the strength and growth of the newspaper, digital side of the newspaper industry has been misunderstood and I think is being underestimated. And I think a lot of companies, digital companies, are going to be looking at the opportunities to expand into the local markets. I think we'll see new companies, Verizon, AOL, that they're not done making acquisitions. I think it'd be ironic if AOL and Time Warner reconvened with Verizon as the parent again. There have been talks about Twitter being for sale, and it'll be very interesting to see whether that's an equity company or whether one of the legacy media players looks toward Twitter as an opportunity. Apple is certainly, you know, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu in the content areas, all looking for ways to extend their business models. Yahoo, once they decide what happens between them and Alibaba, will either be in play or will be an acquirer. You know, there's a lot of focus on what companies like DirecTV and AT&T will do, what Dish will do. Oracle, Adobe, IBM, Salesforce, all of these companies are now getting into the media business in a fairly meaningful way, some through research and data, but looking for acquisitions. So I think we'll see those players. In terms of what I call the boot hill, there are thousands of VC-funded companies in the ad tech space that will be acquired, merged, or are relegated to what I'm calling startup boot hill. The industry will contract and consolidate around market leaders as it always does, and many of those companies will disappear.
All right. What is emotion tech and how will it transform advertising?
Well, emotion tech, you know, is a, if you think about the idea that many of us have Fitbits and many of us have smartwatches. The Fitbit's connected to your mobile device. But think about that Fitbit and that smartwatch coming together, and think about all that data from the Fitbit going up to the cloud. And once it's up in the cloud, it can be integrated and merged with your personal television viewing data, the set-top box data, with your credit card purchase data, and with so many other behaviors on literally a second-by-second basis. So long-term, again, I'm thinking skating where the puck is going. I think marketers are going to be increasingly connecting their advertising messages, their programming, their content with how you react, how you emotionally respond, what your galvanic skin response says. There's already tremendous amounts of research that's neuroscience, where they're actually tapping into your neurology and what's happening in your brain while you're being exposed to different media types. And this is becoming more and more accessible to big data suppliers and to companies. It's not just on the horizon, but it's happening now in test and activation. And I put it all in the generic bucket of emotional research, emotional data. And I think we'll be seeing the integration of marketing exposure, purchase behavior and metrics, neuroscience, location analytics, galvanic skin response data, and the Internet of Things, which is driving all of this, delivering, I believe, in the next 5 years, the first viable currencies in decades for both media selection and creative application that focus on the emotional response that people have to media. Elsewhere in research, increase on the TV side, Nielsen remains the core. Arbitron acquired by Nielsen at the local level for television, for radio. I don't think there'll be much happening on the digital side that'll change the realities of viewability, click fraud, and ad blocking. I believe those will continue, but won't change the dynamics too much. We're seeing a focus on performance-based metrics, with sales results being increasingly important, but they won't replace traditional media currencies. And I do believe that the most valuable short-term media assets will be qualified customer and customer prospect databases, and the ability to tap into those databases and report on sales performance in those databases. And I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Who will comprise the next wave of corporate power, and why should marketers be paying attention to the shift in gender norms in business and society?
Well, if you look at our business, the media and advertising business, and you look at most of the media agencies out there, and most of the mid to low and mid-level and low senior level executives in our business, it's 60 to 70% female, and it's 60 to 70% young people. So clearly, females are emerging, not just in our industry, but across 13 of the top 15 growth industries, where they represent 60 to 70% of the workforce. I believe we're looking at an industry that will be increasingly 25 to 35 years old, female, heavily multicultural. And that as an industry, especially if those on the sales side, really need to be reflecting that same kind of hierarchies in their own sales organizations, in their journalistic organizations, young, increasingly female, and increasingly multicultural.
Well, thank you. That's great. And Jack, we have a few audience questions for you now.
I'd like to just segue a bit there, if I can, into my book for a minute, if you don't mind, because on March 1st I have my new book called The Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century being published, and I'd love. And it talks about a lot of these issues, and also the implications for men and the positive implications of the success of the women's movement, how it's impacting on our business in particular, and some of the narratives that we have related to supporting young men in our industry as well. So hopefully those on board will take a look at Amazon.com, The Future of Men. Thank you for the opportunity to plug my book.
Very good. But yes, we have a few audience questions for you. And the first is, if you became a local metro newspaper publisher, what would be on the top of your list to reinvent or transform?
You know, it's a fascinating question. I think the first thing I would really look to transform, first of all, would be, do I have a strong video, digital video property? Am I producing videos? Are video, is online video a significant part of my business? Have I integrated across all social media platforms? Am I distributing my content not just online on my own website? Am I syndicating my content out? Am I pushing out content aggressively through our mobile distribution? And am I looking at the implications for my business through the Internet of Things, and how media will be communicated in so many new and different ways, right in the home, in the car? So first thing I would do is make sure that I had a very strong tech vision operation, looking at the next 24 to 36 months of technological development and tying my content distribution and revenue models into that. Secondly, I would look at my core business models. And speaking to the newspaper industry, which you talk, you know, newspapers have continued to be basically advertising and distribution. You know, some have branched into developing creative agencies in-house, and others are taking small steps but maintaining those two fundamental business models. First thing I would do is look at where are opportunities that I can tap into as a local, the strongest local medium with strong relationships in the local retail community to build new businesses. Newspapers have more feet on the street than anyone perhaps but the pharmaceutical industry and the real estate industry. And that local expertise is really valuable. So I would look to build a whole new business around, as IBM did when they changed their business model, and as so many other tech companies are doing, expanding out into new fields. I would build new businesses rather than just selling advertising. I'd develop services like local real estate services. I would develop perhaps local office supply sales, you know, with local delivery. I would tap into healthcare opportunities and build healthcare businesses, bringing together small local businesses, software solutions, building out websites for local companies, outsourcing legal services through my businesses. You know, I would be looking to create efficiencies across local communities by being able to offer the scale I can as a newspaper. You know, a friend of mine in the newspaper industry, Ray Chalskowski, even mentioned that you could even secure cleaning contacts and office supplies. So I believe they can be the one-stop source for everything needed to run a business, and that's what I'd look for: alternative business streams that my feet on the street enabled me to create and sell in and build profitable businesses that were supported by advertising and distribution, but were not dependent on it.
Great. And who, excuse me, who or what are some examples of print publishers, magazines included, that you think are making transformative, forward-looking strides versus just reacting?
Oh, there's a lot of transformative strides. There's a lot of forward-looking strides. I'm not sure there are that many successful strides. We've certainly seen companies like the Dallas newspapers that are doing some interesting things on the creative agency side. New York Times has really been out in front on virtual reality and putting itself in the lead and defining itself in many ways around virtual reality. Certainly on the magazine side, we've seen companies like Hearst being very aggressive in building out digital businesses, digital agencies to support their business models. We're seeing Rodale do some really interesting things in the digital side. But what I'm not seeing is a lot of commerce initiatives where they're getting into the business of actually selling relevant products relevant to their resources. You think of the back pages of magazines where they have those classified ads for others, and increasingly I think they have the opportunity to get directly into the commerce and merchandising businesses themselves. I don't think we're seeing a lot of innovation. There are certainly examples out there. There are other people better than I to focus on specifically what they are. But I don't think there's enough innovation and transformation right now in the business, and I think it needs to be accelerated more aggressively.
What do you see happening?
I would also add, I think USA Today and Gannett with their new management teams are doing some really interesting and innovative things as well around the USA Today brand and integration across local and national.
Oh, okay. And what do you see happening in media measurement? What do measurement companies need to keep up with media consumption and best support informed media buying?
Well, again, there's a kind of a yin and a yang in media measurement, as I talked about earlier. The currencies that we have now are likely to continue to exist into the foreseeable future. I believe currencies will and data will continue to focus on cost efficiencies, impressions, awareness, message retention, and that the visionary direction for research and data will be across the Internet of Things, across the cloud-based marketing, where data from so many different sources can be integrated and looked at in the composite and come out with better tools for what's working and what's not working, what's effective and what's not effective. But into the foreseeable future, the agencies are still going to be relegated by their clients to be money managers, with the currency being how many impressions and valid impressions and valuable impressions am I delivering on a cost per thousand basis.
And one last question for you. What products, services, business models in today's media environment do you think will cease in 5 years? What won't a media buyer be buying in 5 years?
Well, I don't think there's any real media properties today that they won't be buying. There'll be an increase, a continued redistribution of dollars. They'll certainly be buying more mobile. They'll be buying more branded content. Though I believe they'll be buying more television. I believe they'll be buying more print. But there'll be a redistribution to those companies that are the most forward-looking, as opposed to media in general that they won't be buying. I think we're going to see in the next 5 years a disappearance of many of the legendary media companies that are simply not adapting to the times across all media, an aggregation and a consolidation of smaller media players into more economically viable, larger groups, and that and those that have automated capabilities will see an increase in their success on selling low engagement inventory. Companies that have high engagement properties and can aggregate and scale themselves. I think the biggest problem we face, and here's something that I don't think will be as successful 5 years from now, and that's the shiny new objects. What we're seeing today are advertisers looking for what's the shiny new object. Where can they put, whether it's $5,000 in the local community, $50,000 in a region, or $500,000 on network, or even $5 million, they're playing. It's like they're tossing a lot of things up against the wall. The agencies want to prove their creativity. The marketing people want to prove to their bosses they're doing their creative things. But then next year, it's what's the next shiny new object? And they're not even using the learning from last year's shiny new object to where they should scale. Marketers are going to be focusing more and more on what can they scale? Where can they invest that's scalable? And so I think we've got to be careful as media sellers to limit our willingness to invest in shiny new objects that a marketer simply discards next year, and then we're on to constantly investing in the next shiny new object in order to get this year's business without being able to scale last year's business again and again and again, so that we're taking that $50,000 client to 500,000, the 500 to 5 million, and the 5 million to 25 million. And that's what I don't think in 5 years marketers will be investing in. I don't believe they'll be investing that much in those one-offs, those shiny new objects that are discarded once they're done.
Well, thank you, Jack. I think that's it for the questions. I'm sure our viewers will really enjoy this. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, again, I can be contacted at jack@myersbiznet.com, and I believe GenConnect will be distributing our white paper to the attendees.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and buy The Future of Men at Amazon.com.
Okay. RAM's portfolio provides unique and strategic solutions with relevant insights to help increase their clients' revenue, grow their audience, and give them a clear understanding of their markets in which they operate, be it local, regional, or national. To find out more about RAM's suite of products, please contact Ola at sales_USA@rampanel.com. Thanks for watching at GenConnectU, where we connect you to life's best experts. Tune into our next RAM webinar on March 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Eleanor Hong, where we are discussing how the media can best reach younger generations. This is Nathan Ryan for GenConnectU, signing off.